Hey all, this is just a brief clip on the politics of the media. Just a very few things I want to highlight. But again, as per usual, the bulk of what I'm trying to communicate to you is going to be found in those two sets of narrated slides that are predicated pretty closely on chapter 11 from our text. All right, so things I want to highlight, things that I need to get off my chest in terms of the politics of the media. One of them is that, what was I going to say? Sometimes my build-up is too slow and I lose the thread. One thing is this. What I've seen just in my own lifetime is a situation where news gathering is increasingly economically unworkable, and commenting on the news, talking shit about the news, the old talking heads thing, that's become very profitable and very popular, endemic. Especially on certain kinds of radio programming and cable television. Okay? And here's the thing, right? So news gathering is really, that's the essence of journalism in terms of how it's relevant to our politics, right? The job of the media, to a very large degree, is to gather up news across the country and across the globe and transmit that information to we the people so that we can hold powerful people accountable. Okay? It's all about that. And the problem has become, it's been estimated that about 85% of all news gathering in the U.S. is done by newspapers. And what platform is in the most trouble these days economically? Newspapers. Because people want newspaper articles to be free and accessible on the internet. And I'm telling you, producing that news is not free at all. It's very expensive to have news bureaus across the country and across the globe. Let me give you a quick snapshot here. A recent report found that in terms of sheer number of news bureaus across the country and across the globe, comparing CNN, a cable television news outlet, and Fox News, another cable television outlet, CNN has 3 times as many news bureaus across the country and across the globe as Fox News. 3 times as many. That tells us a lot right there, doesn't it? Fox News really specializes in people talking smack about the news. Right? They're not gathering it, which isn't very sexy. It's very time consuming and increasingly not profitable. Probably because the expense of doing it is so great and the economic reward is relatively small. Right? People tend to be more drawn to the damn talking heads. That's the theme, right? A lot of the things that we say, oh, that's the media's fault, or we're just being lazy. No. The media is just responding to stimuli emanating from we the people. And so we the people say we want talking heads mostly. Right? Many news outlets will say, fine. It's more profitable. Great. We'll go where the money is. Right, so Fox News has been very clear about this. We're not that interested in gathering news. It's expensive and people aren't that interested in it. But they do like, Sean Hannity or Tucker Carlson, who's now departed. On AM radio, Rush Limbaugh. All these talking heads, right? They don't gather a scrap of news. That's beneath them. What they essentially do is they read newspapers like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal. Right? And then they talk smack about it. That's cheap to produce. Right? You don't need many people to do that. I mean, you have the talking head, right? But you also need people behind the talking head. But with talking smack about news, right, you don't need a whole lot of people behind you to make that happen. You need some. But news gathering is super labor intensive. You need multiple teams of journalists year-round doing investigative journalism. So I've been super disturbed by that, right? That because newspapers are in distress these days, and they do most of our news gathering, it really concerns me Right, and increasingly it's like the cart pulling the horse, right? If the horse is news gathering and the cart is talking smack, which I'm not against talking smack about the news. We need opinion journalists who just express their opinions, hopefully thoughtful and informed, which is often not the case, but it can be. Right? That's useful and entertaining. That has value. I'm not saying it doesn't have value, but it doesn't have primary value. Primary value lies in news gathering. So I'm worried that increasingly the cart talking smack about the news is pulling the horse, news gathering. Right, so with the decline of news gathering and less investigative journalism, that really concerns me. And I'm not sure what can be done about it. That's a critical issue I wanted to get across to you guys. What else did I want to communicate to you? That there is evidence that the kind of news that, and again, I often want to point the finger at we the people. I hate this analytically flabby, it's the media's fault bullshit. The evidence is that Americans, by and large, don't have a lot of appetite for news about other countries. Right? We're a large and powerful country. We're somewhat geographically isolated from much of the rest of the world. And we're just not that interested in the politics of, let's say, even our neighbor Canada to the north. We're not interested really in Denmark's healthcare policies or energy policy in Germany, or just, standard political news in other countries. We're not that interested. All right, so there's not much appetite for that. We're a little bit of a navel-gazing people. So I don't love that about Americans. Right, so you might say, the media doesn't do enough coverage of foreign politics, except when there's a disaster or a war. Well, there's a reason the American media doesn't do much on international politics. There's not much appetite among we the people for that, and it's a damn shame. But that's not the fault of the media per se. All right, that's the fault of we the people. And then let's face it, right? News gathering across the globe is super expensive. You need a permanent news bureau in Beijing, China, in Berlin, Germany, in Paris, France, in London, England, and then in all those major countries. Right? Very costly, and not a lot of consumer appetite. So American media really does a poor job of covering international politics for the most part. Everyday politics. All right. Yeah, and then what else? Shoot, I had something else I wanted to talk about. Oh, radio. And I don't know, I think this is covered in the narrated slides. I want to highlight it. Radio, there's actually some really good news gathering done on radio, on the FM side of the dial. Right, and that's public radio. Public radio, National Public Radio, does a fantastic job of news gathering. That's the only rival to the domination of that area by newspapers, is National Public Radio. Morning edition, weekend edition, and all things considered in the late afternoon, early evening. On 88.9 on your FM dial right here in Las Vegas, Nevada, KNPR. KNPR also sponsors a program every morning called State of Nevada about issues relevant to Nevada, with honestly a particular emphasis on Las Vegas. In fact, the studios are right here for that show, right here at College of Southern Nevada Charleston campus. Fun fact to know and learn. All right. That's what I want to highlight here. I do want to emphasize once more, although it's in the slides, that it was old Thomas Jefferson who said that, if forced to choose between no government and no press, he would choose no government. That he's being dramatic, but the underlying point is a serious one. You cannot have a functioning constitutional democracy or a republic or whatever you want to call it without an independent media or press. Right? As a voice exclusive of the government. Right? Because if we only get our information from the government, that's a problem. Right? Because the government is going to tend to give a sort of a self-promoting narrative that doesn't allow us to hold them accountable. I don't blame government for that, right? It's in the nature of institutions to do that, to self-justify. Humans do that with one another. We self-justify what we say and do to others. Most people don't want to think of themselves as the bad guy, all right? So I don't hold, I don't have a personal grudge against the government for that tendency. It's human nature. But that's why we need an independent media, right? To give a different point of view on the government that's more critical, and powerful corporations and powerful individuals. And so that we, the people, in our democracy can hold them accountable, hold power accountable. It's so important. All right. Thanks all.